What you're looking at is just another sorceress killing Hell Baal for the umpteenth millionth time. But if you take a quick look down in that bottom right corner, you might notice that it looks like this playthrough took us 50 hours and 10 minutes. Now what you can't see is that this Baal kill alone took 23 minutes to finish. And that's because you're not just looking at the run-of-the-mill sorceress killing Hell Baal here, you're looking at the world's first ever, completely untwinked, solo self-found, starting at level 1, Hell Pacifist Sorceress. And to even go beyond that, you're looking at the world's first ever pacifist Hell Baal kill in Diablo 2 Resurrected. Now, what does a pacifist run? Because there's a lot of rules, and in fact, let me just go ahead and show you them all from speedrun.com. The long and short is that you cannot in any way, shape, or form ever choose to willingly attack a monster. You can't use spells that would attack monsters, you can't use mercenaries, you can't even use fire, explosion, or poison shrines to deal damage to monsters. All forms of damage dealt to a monster has to come from these sources. Attacker takes damage, Thorn's Aura, chance to cast when struck, chance to cast on death, and the much less used attacker takes lightning damage. Shoutouts to Sparking Mail. What that all boils down to is that the monster has to hit you to generate the damage that they take. So I took this challenge very, very seriously. I started as a new level 1 character, farmed every piece of gear you're going to see in this video. Now here's the kicker. This run was only theoretically possible, and to give the appropriate amount of dues to the people who paved the way before me, most notably Dr. Cliche and Blazer Flamewing were the original lobbyer and the original innovator of the Paladin run that only completes normal difficulty in LOD. While they theory crafted what kind of gear you would need to be able to do this in a Hell run, they were only ever able to prove that it would work with a fully twinked out Paladin, using full facets with chance to cast on death effects for handling the monsters in Hell difficulty. Little did I know that the changes in 2.4, for all intents and purposes, did not change this run in any way, and the grind fest that was ahead of me is something that I hope I'll look fondly back on in days to come. Now, other than just having teleport, the thing that makes the sorceress such a great option is that the best chance to cast spells all happen to be sorceress spells, or at least for gear that you can reasonably farm and shop for. So you could cover yourself in a complete set of chance to cast Nova gear, and if you have 8 pieces like we did in the endgame, you have over 100% chance to cast that spell. So every time you get hit, Nova will go off. You'll see that you also have access to stuff like Frost Nova if you're wearing a Cold Kill hatchet, or if you manage to craft gloves like these. You can even gain access to stuff like Chain Lightning from Naja's Circlet. You could get Static Field from Huanin's armor. Not a lot of people know this, but you can even get chance to cast Hydra when struck on an amulet. So if you're willing to put points down into Hydra so they'll actually stick around, you're willing to put points into Fire Mastery to buff it up, Lightning Mastery for Nova, a little bit of the synergies, you can empower these spells and they do decent damage, around like 300 damage per second, which in Hell doesn't really cut the cake. You can also make Edge Rune Word. This is a ladder only rune word, so you used to not be able to make this in an LOD speedrun, but now you gain access to Thorn's Aura, which is doing just about 100 damage physical whenever you're attacked, and also returns 8 times the physical damage that the monster does. Now all of that's before the monster's resistances reduce that damage. The kicker here though is you need to be able to survive enough hits so that when monsters hit you, you can kill them with your spells. And it turns out that even at level 72, a fully vitality dumped sorceress doesn't have that many hit points. That's where your cold armors come into play. Now these are skills that you very well may have never used, so I'll quickly explain them. Shiver Armor is going to do upwards of 500 damage whenever a monster hits you with a melee attack. Chilling Armor is going to do over 500 damage whenever a ranged monster does a ranged attack on you. And it does it by shooting an ice bolt back out at that target. You can actually kind of abuse this if you put a ranged monster in between you and a melee monster. Whenever they shoot you, the ice bolt will hit the melee monster. We use that a lot in Nightmare, but I won't bore you with the details. Add on to that, you gain access to Cold Mastery, which if you didn't use any of your points in the other trees, you can max out. And then in addition to using a lower resist wand, you can get most monsters down to minus 100 resistance as long as they're not immune. So that means that your Shiver Armor is doing almost 900 damage and your Chilling Armor is doing almost 1000 damage. But there is one monster who kind of doesn't give a crap about any of those spells I just said, and we don't actually really have a way of killing him, and that's Lord Seis in Hell difficulty. Lord Seis in Hell difficulty has 180 cold resistance. That is unbreakable. There is no combination of skills in the game that will ever make him be able to take cold damage. On top of that, his fire, lightning, and poison resistances are so high that if he spawns with magic resistant, spectral hit, fire, lightning, enchanted, he is now immune to a second element, and that happens about 80% of the time. Oh, and just throw in the fact that the minions that he spawns with are immune to fire damage as well. He always spawns with fanaticism aura, so his monsters can two-shot you, even if you have something like Fade proc from Treachery. And then he can also spawn with 2 additional modifiers, so if he spawns with extra fast, burst, multiple shot, the list goes on and on. It is near impossible to kill Lord Seis. Lord Seis's spells and abilities do not trigger chance to cast when struck. They also do not trigger attacker takes damage or thorns damage. So how do you kill Lord Seis? The answer is you have to have other monsters hit you within range of him, so that when your chance to cast Nova skill goes off, he's within range of that Nova skill. So at first glance, it seems like, okay, I'll just use lower resist a lot of the time. Heck, if I got really lucky, I can even put on a crescent moon and then just slowly but surely kill him with Nova procs. It might take a while, but it seems doable. Here's the other problem. Oblivion Knights in Diablo 2 cast a special spell that they're not supposed to have access to. It doesn't use an animation, and they only do it when they're not actively engaged in combat, and that's Bestow. But let's talk about Lord Seis first. Luckily, he's a monster that you have to kill. So every monster that you have to kill in the game doesn't regenerate. You'll see that act bosses don't regenerate, and none of the seal bosses regenerate either. Bestow is a skill that dramatically increases the regeneration rate of a monster and allows them to regenerate even if they are a boss monster. Lord Seis can cast Bestow on himself, and every other Oblivion Knight in the Chaos Sanctuary could cast it on him as well. And since you never want to be fighting more than one monster at a time, you literally can't survive. He is very often on the edge of the screen, where other Oblivion Knights are also on the edge of the screen. When they're not engaged in combat, without seeing an animation, they just have a chance to cast Bestow. There is no way for you to out-damage the regeneration rate of Bestow because it heals the monster on every frame that they're not taking damage. So even if you had continuous Nova Blast hitting a Seis, who was bestowed, there are 3 frames in between each attack where he would be healing, and your pitiful Nova damage is not enough to counteract this regen. Now what that all boiled down to was we needed to find a different way to kill Lord Seis because the Nova procs weren't working, he was getting bestowed all of the time, and we needed some source of damage that was dealt on every single frame for a chance, even if he was bestowed, to actually be able to kill him. And that's where Enlightenment comes in. Enlightenment has a 5% chance to cast a level 15 Blaze Wind Struck, which means that we could put down a patch of fire damage and somehow either pull or push Lord Seis into it, so that with the combination of our lower resistance charges, maxing out our fire mastery, and maxing out Blaze's singular synergy, which is warmth, and we might be able to kill this guy. The only issue is that you need a pull rune. On this build, you can't farm Hell Countess because she's immune to cold and fire, and all of her monsters will kill you before you have any chance of killing her. And we even went so far as to do our Hell Forge, where we got an rune, which is pretty cool and completely useless for this run. So what did that leave us? Well, lower Kurost farming. Players 5 has the best chances for Pull Rune and Lem Rune, which we could eventually cube up to a Pull Rune, and it only took us about 8 hours of farming. But hey, in the first 30 minutes we got a Gull Rune, which again, completely useless, but it was cool to drop it. Now I'm not going to make you watch 8 hours of us farming LK runs. I'll just go ahead and include the clip where we actually dropped it. Austin area is like still very tied to a lot of the vernacular of the original transatlantic length. Oh shit! Ah! So easy peasy, right? We got our Pull Rune, we got Blaze, just have to lay it down, get Seis into it, and then everything else should be a piece of cake. Wasn't that easy. For the rest of the video, I am just going to include those highlights with a little bit of voiceover, and I'll just include how long it took us, and when I have the numbers, how many attempts it took us to actually make it happen. Now, what you can't see is that this was actually day 2 of having the Pull Rune. I put 6 hours into trying to farm the perfect setup where there were no monsters up in Lord Desace's area. We were able to pull all of the Oblivion Knights around the surrounding area far enough away where they wouldn't aggro. Still having Stranglers, which are the finger mages up in that area, to be able to hit us, to actually proc the blaze, dropping the blaze on the ground where Lord Desace actually steps in it or potentially spawns in it, which actually never happened. He always spawned outside of the blaze's damage. And in this last attempt, we actually just got incredibly lucky. Every time you go back to town, there's a chance he'll cast Bestow on himself because he's not active. And for whatever reason, he just never did. Given enough deaths and enough attempts, we eventually got him. Oh, on top of that, the Infector of Souls actually got bestowed by an Oblivion Age while we were pulling him into position. So I needed the help of multiple Stranglers using their ranged attacks, triggering our Chilling Armor to shoot projectiles at him, with a 100% chance to cast Nova, with attacker takes damage on, so that he was taking damage in such amounts over so many frames that we actually outpaced his regen. Let me just go ahead and show you, and again, I'll just include a timer of how long each individual boss section took us to kill them. Also, I need somebody to be ready to make the clip. I'm gonna need a good clip of this, boys.
How may I be of help? Good afternoon.
You can't even see, he's not even in the frame. Now there at the end, there was a lot of screaming and yelling, and I tried to protect your ears from it. But there you go. That's the world first Hell Pacifist. Completely untwinked, solo self-found, starting at level 1. Every bit of XP, every bit of gear, and every bit of gold spent was all farmed on a single character. Honestly, I would just like to say thank you to the members in chat and the people who follow on YouTube and the people who hang out in the Discord community, because they watched me try this not just once, but twice. We actually had a run prior that got completely bugged because I accidentally ruined our shared stash and lost all of our gear, and that was around Act 3 Hell. Just this single attempt was a combined total of about 2 months of streams worth of gameplay, and honestly, this is something that I've been thinking about doing since I started speedrunning Diablo 2 all the way back in LOD, something like 3 or 4 years ago. I tried to cut it down to just the information that you need, so I really hope that you enjoyed the video. Please let me know down in the comments if you have any other questions. All of this was streamed live on twitch.tv/macrobioboy, so if you really like the idea of this or just how we're kind of approaching the game, feel free to come hang out. I'd love to have you there. Because while it was agonizing at times and there was a ton of repetitive farming, this is probably some of the most fun that I've had streaming, because everybody was just so on board and just waiting for the day that we finally finished the challenge. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.